All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Pistolka, and I am excited for our guest today because we've got a returning guest in Ron Higgs, and we're going to be talking about leadership team building to facilitate your exit. Ron, thanks for being here today.
Damon, thank you again for having me. I always have so much fun chatting with you. And then we
Yeah.
can always we talk about your other partner in crime, Kurt, there too.
Yeah.
Always.
Yep. Well, so Ron, first of all, I mean, other people may have heard about, met you before things, but let's for people that may not have, let's tell them a little bit about your background and how you got into doing what you're doing today and how you got into it. Sorry.
Wow, how long do we have? Because I don't know. I'll try to shorten
Oh, I
this
got some
up.
good questions about this stuff too. So yeah. This is gonna be awesome.
I will try to shorten this up as much as I can. I started my career in the Navy, went to the Naval Academy, became a naval flight officer, flying in S-3 Vikings off of aircraft carriers, went on to test pilot school, got to fly all sorts of different aircraft there. And I changed my career to program management and acquisition, which means I worked with defense contractors on naval aviation programs and satellite programs. And I did that to the end of my career. The thing that I really enjoyed about that, working with engineering teams, leading engineering teams, really smart and capable people. Um, I really, really enjoyed that. When I got out, I did what all of us military guys do, right? I stayed in the defense industrial complex. I worked for a few defense contractors, and I found something missing in aerospace and defense. I was lucky enough to fly airplanes for one of our major aircraft manufacturers for a little while, moved into the engineering world while I was again in charge of groups of engineers on the other side working with the Navy. That was great. Then I realized how much of a pain I must have been to work with when I was in the Navy to some of these folks. Anyway, I got another calling. Something told me that, yeah, you need to be doing something else. And so I got a lot of joy from helping people, especially helping individual contributors, highly specialized people, engineers, make their transition into leadership, people leadership. Um, Let me pause there for a minute. Any questions so far? Because there's a little bit more. I lost you, man.
Sorry, I'm writing notes, so we're ready. Keep going.
All right. So when I decided to leave that world, kind of struck out on my own without a very good plan. I said, I'm going to be a leadership consultant. And that, I had a little bit of trouble getting myself off the ground. It's tough out there, as an independent consultant. But I found support with other independent consultants, which was great. Now let's fast forward a little bit. I had mixed success there. And through networking and pure luck, I ended up with a job as a COO of a small company. I'm like, this is great. And I really did. I really enjoyed that. I think I did a great job there, but I enjoyed it. And I actually applied my knowledge of systems engineering to my role as COO in that company because I looked at the company as a system and how do I get all these different operating functions of the system to work together towards a common goal. I enjoyed it. Unfortunately, that was in 2020. We all know what happened in 2020. So I ended up getting laid off. So that was a short lived experience. But I came back and I restructured my business as a fractional COO business. And I also
Mhm.
did fraction. If you're familiar with EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System, I was a fractional integrator for companies operating on EOS. And I like that. So it gave me the opportunity to work with different types of companies in different industries and things like that. So through my experience in that, I found that I really enjoyed working with and coaching the senior members of the team. I did some coaching of the CEO, but I also coached the executive team, mostly on how to work better together, how to collaborate,
Mhm.
how to put the company's needs ahead of the needs of theirs and their own departments. Really enjoyed that. So that's what I'm doing now. I sort of moved away from my fractional COO work to coaching executives and executive teams, and I look for highly specialized engineers, highly technical folks to help them with their leadership challenges. I also do some advisory work for startups and small companies and some project-based work as well. So here we are.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I got a couple things, because a couple things have been on my mind. You and I have had some conversations over the past few weeks. You have someone that you graduated with from the Naval Academy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're up at the space shuttle now.
Oh, in the space station, and I haven't been watching the
Space
news, but
station. Oh yeah, that shows how old I
she's
am.
still stuck. So her name is Sunny Williams, classmate of from the Naval Academy, and then her and I were. She was in the test pilot school class ahead of me, but we both. I ended up being a flight instructor at test pilot school, and we were both flight instructors at the same time. But I have U.S. Naval Academy class of '87, full of a lot of great people. One person who probably everyone out there has heard of is David Robinson, the Admiral, Rookie of the Year, San Antonio Spurs. He's one of our classmates. And we have some admirals, we have some captains of industry, we have a lot of great people. I'm really proud to be a part of that class. And like you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Sunny gave us we did a Zoom call for our class from the space station. So she led us around the space station, during the Zoom call. It's probably
Yeah.
the coolest Zoom call I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, because you said she went to the cupola where you could see the Earth through
Yes.
the space station. That
Yeah,
had to be an incredible view.
it was fantastic. Can't
Oh,
describe it. We're just lucky to be able to have classmates in positions like that. And just through my time at test pilot school, I got to know a lot of astronauts. So one of the other astronaut that she went with, Barry Wilmore, was one of our flight instructors at test pilot school as well. So I know quite a few. Commander of the last space shuttle mission, things like that. And
yeah,
you and I have talked before, but I was a candidate to be an astronaut and
yeah,
was disqualified at NASA for medical reasons.
yeah, yeah. No, it's cool because I've been thinking about it because she's been up there a bit longer than expected.
Yes. Yes, I haven't read up too much on that. I was on vacation last week and I tuned out of pretty much everything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's really interesting when you see your career path, and so I would have to think, when you were a test pilot for the military, that made you go into a lot of different situations, because one day I might be flying this and I'm flying some, little tiny thing, some big behemoth, something goes slow, something goes fast, something, you had to be able to react to a lot of different types of equipment.
Yes. So, as I mentioned before, if you saw Top Gun, the original Top Gun, Maverick and Goose was in the back seat. So I was a backseater and sort of a professional co-pilot, weapon
There you
system
go.
operator, navigator, but all the same, still in the airplane, still lots of things happening,
Yeah.
and lots of things that happen really, really fast.
Yes.
One of the things that they really taught us how to do was understand the basics on how things work. And if you understand the basics on how things work, especially they're intuitive, you can get into one airplane and operate it from another because you know the basics. Just like driving a car to a
Yeah.
truck. If you move from a car to a truck, okay, I've got a steering wheel, I've got the brakes, I've got the basics, and I know what all of this does. Now, airplanes are a little different, especially military airplanes, because they're all built to do something different. So they have all sorts of equipment, some that we can tell you about and some that we can't. And
Yeah.
designed by different manufacturers that have their different ideas of, a user interface. Kind of like now, you sit in one car, especially now that the cars are all advanced and they have touch screens and buttons and everything else. And you get in cars nowadays, you're like, man, what were they thinking when they did this?
Yeah.
So some of the airplanes are just as different as all of our cars that we get in.
Yeah. I think, and my point in this has to be very similar to your coaching now, when you walk into these different situations and you're seeing okay, I'm in an engineering business this day, and I'm in a different kind of business this day, and a different kind of business that day, that kind of prepared you for that early on.
Well, I think the military in general did. I think one thing that happened is, I'm New Jersey boy, right? Ended up going to the Naval Academy prep school first before I went to the Naval Academy. So I'm thrown into this situation with people from all over the country, people with thick Southern accents that I can't understand, people from Boston who I can't understand, and people from Philadelphia who, close to where I live that I could barely understand.
Yeah.
People from that grew up on the beach in California, people that grew up in the desert in Arizona. And one thing that we learned was how we all get along. But a lot of our interaction and relationship building was just talking about the differences in the place that we come from and the differences in our lives. The
Yeah.
common thing in all of this, human beings. Okay.
Yeah.
So adaptability in the military. So in the military, you move from one assignment to another. These assignments can be drastically different from one another. So one of the things that I think every veteran brings, especially those of us who spent a career in the military, is adaptability. We can adapt
Yeah.
to just about anything. And after living on the Navy ship, I think you could adapt to just about anything
Yeah.
easily.
I'm sure that was really challenging with the tight quarters. Whew. Uh, well, so today we're talking about leadership team building to facilitate your exit. And really this is something that I think, you're training in the past, you're training more recently, helping coaching teams, and the work you've done with EOS and predictable success and some of these other methodologies really help a lot, because there's so many different things that we need to consider as an owner is contemplating that exit, or an owner is really trying to transition their business from one step to one where the business is really separate from that owner and can generate revenue and sustain themselves with a lot less owner involvement.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned in one of my jobs, one of the engineering jobs that I had, was that I used to measure how well I was doing based on how well my job got done when I wasn't there. Right. And so I would have people step up. I would just build a relationship with everyone. What's the next step for you? What do you want to do? Okay, then I would teach them that. And I would always put somebody in charge. Then I left, and now they hated it. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, you're the acting program manager while I'm on
Yeah.
vacation, while I'm on travel. Right. And so that was one of the things that I carried with me to building strong teams. Now, you have to create relationships with individuals to know what their desires are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and once you know what they want to do, help them achieve that. And so building a strong team is the best way to do that. So if you're a business owner and you have a strong team behind you to where you can go for a vacation for a month and then be confident that everything that needs to get done is going to get done, that's the best place that you can be when you're ready to sell that business.
Yeah. And it's in what we've told people for many years is that it's not just when you're ready to sell, it's when you want to own the business rather than have the business owning you.
Yep, makes perfect sense. That's exactly right.
Yeah. And another little fact that I was going to share in here too is that if you are thinking about selling a business, and I forget exactly who, but I think if you do a Google search on this, you'll see it again, is one of the bigger firms that sells businesses in the United States said that it is a 30 to 50% reduction in value someone will see if there's too much owner dependence, and depending on the amount of owner dependence. So this can cost people hundreds of thousands, if not many millions of dollars, if they're going into a business. And you and I know you've seen $50 million a year businesses that are run by some really smart men and women that are super talented, but they have not built a team that could make that transferable. So it's one of these things that can go unnoticed, because you can make good money in a business like that. But what are some of the things that you see when you're walking in and, hey, Susan's super smart. She's so talented. She's built this huge business, but there's not much around Susan as far as a leadership team. What are some of the things that you see, and what are some of the steps that those kind of leaders need to be going through?
Well, one, it's really easy to see when everything is dependent on the owner, right? Everything just comes to a halt. Even they can't get through one meeting without the phone ringing, having to step out, having somebody call them to do this, right? But there's different types of people out there, right? There's some people that thrive on that. There's some people that love it, sort of like being the star player on the team. I love it, right? And some people have their identities wrapped up in that. So it's really hard to get them to let go. But when you're talking about looking at the future, let's look at the future. What does the future look like and what would you like to do? Because if you're going to sell this business eventually, right? Well, if the business is here, who's going to buy that? So you want to completely turnkey business ready to go when it's time for you to sell it. Nothing says that you could build that overnight, but and some people have trust issues as well, right? So the first thing that we do is a little bit of self-awareness. And I think self-awareness is key to almost everything in leadership. People have to understand what their personal challenges are. I mean, really, emotionally, how is this business to you emotionally? Is it like a child? Is it something you're going to be able to let go? What are
Yeah.
you going to do when you let it go? Who are you going to be when you let it go? Right? Can you trust other people to run it? Do other people have good ideas? Well, of course they do, right? There's more than one way to do things right. Right. And
Hmm.
sometimes those of us that have been in leadership positions have to let that go. It's like, well, that's not the way I would have done it, but I'm doing leader stuff, not individual contributor stuff. So that's going to have to be good enough. And then there are people more times than not that have showed me things. I'd say, hey, this is the way I do it. And then somebody's turned around and go, well, I do it this way. And I go, wow, okay, that's a much better way than I do it. So that's the way we're doing it for now. So it's a two-way street. You can learn from people. So if you
Hmm.
have this idea that you can learn from anyone, even the lowest level employee that you have, you can learn something from them. So the biggest thing we start with is self-awareness, right? There's emotional, and then let's look at a skills gap. Let's look at what you know, and let's look at what you don't know. There's some people out there, well, I'm not good at finance. I just talked with a founder today. He said, you know what, I'm not good at finance. I need to find a good finance person. Well, there's somebody with some self-awareness that understands what they don't know so they could start filling those gaps, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, a support system. This is a tough thing to sell a business, as you well know. I don't have to tell you that, right? Even being at the top, who do you talk to? Who do you vent to? Who can you confide in? You certainly not any of your employees. Maybe your spouse is involved or doesn't understand, but you have to have a support system, mentors, friends. As I mentioned to you before, I was on the other end of that. Like my best friend sold the business last year. He and I talked very often while he was in the middle of it because he just needed somebody to talk to, right? And I was there
Yeah.
for him, and I was happy to be there. And then starting on that, once you realize that, and once you realize what you have to do, then you have to start building some kind of personal development plan and prioritizing it. And an easy example is that, hey, I'm not a really high EQ person, right? So I should probably get someone in here that is a high EQ person to balance me.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that you really bring to these situations is helping that self-awareness in the beginning, because a lot of people want to jump right in and start doing, but you're bringing this, hey, what about you? And I like that because you've switched your coaching, so now you're really starting to coach those owners, that highest level executive, that ownership team, if it's a team, to really get them understanding themselves and how they can work together better. And then branching out there to the team, because if you don't do that, you have, as you said, self-awareness, you won't be able to go out. Like you said, the conversation you had earlier was, I don't know finance. I need to find a finance person or someone that knows that. If they don't understand that part about themselves, that I don't know this, that's where you're really helping them now, is getting that first thing done, because without it, they really don't understand why they're making these changes.
Right. And then prioritizing it and then holding them accountable. Right. And that's a big thing for somebody on the outside, and us coaches to be accountability partners for these folks.
Yeah. So as people are going through this process, building out this leadership team, because good leadership team is a good leadership team. If you can sell your business with a great leadership team, you can run your business with a great leadership team. It's all valuable to you, no matter what you're doing. What are some of the first things that people need to address as they're going through this process? I figured out, okay, this is kind of me. Now I'm starting to build on my team.
Well, like you said, excessive owner dependence means they may not have a leadership team. So the first thing is that, hey, let's develop a leadership team. Then you have to step back and go, let's look at the organizational structure. Do we have an organizational structure that's going to support our product or service? Or depending on the size of the company, do you have roles, or do you even have an org chart? I mean, how many places have you been that don't have an org chart? Like an org
Yeah.
chart? Yeah, I think we have one of those, but the roles are defined by human beings. So there's like, well, this is what Billy does. This is what Susie does. This is what so-and-so does, right? You have to move away from that. You have to move away from that to really establish an organizational structure and writing down roles. This is what this company needs this person to do. So we need somebody to be the operations manager. This
Mm-hmm.
is what the company needs the operations manager to do. And if the person who is sort of doing that function might not be the person that the company needs to do it moving into the future. And that's the hard part. So you have to start with the organizational structure, because that's where your decisions are made. That's where you understand who's responsible for what. And then there's responsible and accountable. Who's responsible for the work? People actually doing the work, right? Who's accountable? These are the leaders of the person doing the work, right? And then that needs to be clear. And then once you figure out the roles, then you have to put the right person into those roles, right? Again, and it may not be the person that's in the role. So, and some people may not make the journey.
Yeah.
And this is my saying: the people who build the foundation aren't necessarily the people who build the house, right? So there are some people that can take you so far, and then there's others that have to step in and take you the rest of the way, or part of the way, or through the next phase or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
it's really important to get the structure and then get the right people in those seats.
Yeah. And we hear this talked about a lot. It's getting the right people in the right seats, but you're talking about before that, you're identifying this. This is where we're at today, and that's not working like we want. Here are the roles we really need to look at and need to get people in. And this is what they need to do, because we have to lay out that organizational structure before we can put people in the seat, get the right people in the right seat on the bus. We're not even to that right people in the right seat on the bus, because we don't know what seats we're putting in that bus.
Not
And
only that, we don't know whether it's a bus, an airplane, a train, or a car.
yeah, exactly. And this is where I think people skip forward too fast, because really taking the time to look at, this is what this role does. This department does, or whatever it is, to step back and look, not what it's like today, not that, like you said, Susie's doing this, so that's the department. No, it's not that way. It's like, what does this business really need? Because that kind of fresh look at it, like a coach can give them, like they can do themselves, or someone like you can come in and help them do this. That's what really allows that business to open up. It's like we don't even know that we're constrained as much as we are by our own organization, until we go through these steps, get those people in the right spot, and then really let the team start to do what they need to do.
Right. And an additional layer of that is titles. So a lot of people are wrapped up in titles, and you tend to give people big titles to start out with, right? And we're going to call Mike here the director of operations, but we don't. Mike isn't good with people, so we don't give him any people management responsibility. So this actually happened to me at one place as a COO. So it's like, okay, so we can't, director means that you are managing managers at the lowest level, right?
Mhm.
And so you can't hold the title of director with no direct report, with no one reporting to you. I mean, unless you're on the board of directors, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so that's what the company needs. The company needs someone who holds the title of director to be able to have some business development responsibility, to think strategically, to contribute to the vision, and to lead leaders.
Mhm.
We have a person here that's doing none of those, but they're called the director of operations. So we need to find Mike the right role, the right
Yeah.
job. And so Mike, of course, is going to be upset because his title's being taken away, right? So when you start off with those lofty titles, you might get yourself in trouble early because you don't want to look like you're demoting people, but you need to clearly define what that role is, and you need the right person in it.
Yeah. That's a great point about no lofty titles. Because if you start that too soon and with that, it's not appropriate, you will run into problems later
Right.
when you need to redo it.
Now let's move forward with building the right team, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about an executive team. So the business owner, assuming they know, okay, I need to let go a little bit. I need to build a team. So sports analogy coming up, right? I was the star player, and now, right now, I need to step off the field and be the coach. And then there's a progression of, okay, I'm the coach. I'm coaching. I'm not playing, but now I need to hire a head coach. Or I'm sorry, I'm become the head coach and I need to hire other coaches, right?
Mhm.
So now where or am I going to put those other coaches? How do I find those other coaches? And once I have that team of coaches, okay, I'm the head coach. I've got a team of coaches, which is your leadership team. Okay, now we need to make sure that that team is cohesive and collaborative, and that they understand that they're there to run the business, not necessarily run their department, right? And the last thing is, I'm a big fan of assessments. It doesn't matter which one you use. I use a relatively simple one, as you and I have discussed before. But as far as that goes, we all know what visionaries are, right? Visionaries are the people with the ideas, always at 30,000 feet. What's the next big idea? If everybody on your team is a visionary, you only have that one perspective. So you want as many perspectives as possible as your, on your leadership team. So whatever kind of assessment you use, it's prudent to make sure that everyone represented has a different style so that you have uh, as many perspectives as possible, as you're running the company, solving problems and moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And you make great points there. Again, taking the time to understand who you have on the team or you want to put on the team and understand their personalities, because you do have to have the right mix and the right fit for the role. Because the personalities fit for the role is huge.
Right. And people complement each other. So there are people out there that are biased towards action. They always say, we got to do something. So we don't have time to think about this. We're going to do something.
Mhm.
So they get themselves into a ready, fire, aim situation. And then you've got those people who think things through. Well, let's sit back and think about this. Right. So if you've got a whole bunch of thinkers, they're not going to do anything because they're thinking
Yeah.
about it all the time. And if you got a whole bunch of doers, they're going to go in and get themselves in trouble because they didn't think about it first. So they need each other. It's complementary, and it's a little bit more complex than that, but you can see that where they need each other. Hey, we can't let you guys think too long, right? On the other hand, hey, don't jump in. You got to think for a minute before you jump in the shallow into the pool. right? So again, those folks all need each other. So it's not bad. I mean, so that's healthy conflict that you're going to create.
Yeah. So as you're doing this with teams, then what are some of the things that okay, so we're sitting here now, we're building this leadership team out. I've taken the time to understand myself. I've with my people helping me either internally or externally or just my accountability group or my support system. I've laid out the roles, I've started putting people in place, and now we're talking about moving forward. What are some of the situations you talk about and see that this team really needs to be understanding?
So one of the things I touched on earlier is the team needs to understand that they're running the company as a team, right? And not necessarily there to represent their department. So I'm sure you've seen this. People come into a leadership team meeting. I'm here for ops. I'm here for HR. I'm here for finance. I'm here for X. Or actually, you're there to make the decisions to run the company, right? And then so ops, finance, HR, X is secondary to running the company. And the other thing is they should know their jobs, but they should also know the jobs of the other folks on the executive team so that they can understand the impacts of what they do to the other departments. So I'm sure you've seen this too. People just they're in their silo and they're just doing what they want to do in their silo with complete disregard to how it impacts any of the other departments. And so once you get them thinking and understanding each other's jobs, then it's like, hey, if I'm the ops guy and I do this, I, this is going to have this impact on finance. I better go talk to the finance guy and see what his input on that is. And for me, as the COO, I was doing that, right? I was talking to everybody else. When the people on the team start talking to each other, that's success.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
they need to be in that collaborative environment and focused and biased towards, the health and well-being of the business over that of their department.
That's a great point. I think two great points that you in, and let's just soak that in a second, because letting that team know that they're running the company as a team, I think that is a critical and often it just not usually talked about. People think that, yeah, an owner, right? An owner that's in here, that's an entrepreneur or whatever, that's been in there doing it. They think people automatically know this, and it's not. It needs to be communicated. So what are some of the ways? I mean, because this is kind of a big deal. I mean, how do they do that? How do they step back and do that? Is there exercise you help people through just to really get that team engaged so they understand that?
Well, one really is, shameless plug for coaching, right? But coaching is a part of it. Coaching these executive teams to sort of see through those blind spots. I mean, you'd be
Mm,
amazed when somebody comes in from the outside and just mentions those things. Even using a simple assessment and getting folks to understand each other. And, like, wow, like, you know what? I never understood that Damon was a thinker, right? And I'm a doer. So he's always going to his first instinct is going to be to step back and think about it and complicate it, where my first instinct is just going to be to jump in
yeah,
and start doing something, right?
yeah,
And just that understanding about each other helps in some cases. And then again, the point with, hey, I actually am here to run a business. So this awareness is key too. Just having that awareness helps a lot too.
yeah, yep. Very cool. So you said something before we got on. It was the iceberg of problems, or what were you referring to? Because I think this
Um,
is something that leadership teams need to think about all the time.
the iceberg of ignorance. And you'll have to
Iceberg
look
of
it up. It's not
ignorance.
me. I didn't come up with it, but I love it. Excuse me. And the iceberg of ignorance just talks about problems and issues in the company and how well they're known throughout the company. So the
Yeah.
bottom line is, I think it assigns some actual numbers to this. The one number I remember is that the executive team only knows about 4% of the problems and issues in the company.
Yeah.
And then the lower, so the next level, is a greater percentage than that. And I think the first line manager level may be something like 47%, but the worker level, the individual contributor level, they know 100% of the problems. So that, how do you communicate that? How do you have open and honest communication, transparency, things like that, and inclusiveness in making decisions where the leadership team is making the decisions knowing 4% of the things that's going on in the company? How do you combat that? It's a very interesting thing. And it reminds me of there's two things. It's one that I believe the closer you are to the top of an organization, the fewer people there are that'll be willing to tell you the truth, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody wants to give you paint a rosy picture. And there's I didn't make this up, right? There's an ongoing thing in the military about once officers get promoted to general, it's like, congratulations, you're a general now. No one will ever tell you the truth again. And there's some truth to that. I
Yes.
worked for a 3-star admiral when I was in the Navy. I was the admiral's aide, and I know from being at a lower level how much things get sugar coated and reported up to the top. The things that I tell my boss, and then imagine what he tells his boss, and it keeps going all the way up to the top. And
Yeah.
they really have this view of what's going on. It's really sort of a nominal view, surface level view of what's really going on in the company.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think that, and I just looked it up while we were online, is Sidney Yoshida did this
That's right.
in the late 80s, that they talked about it. But it is, when you're talking about this whole thing of building this leadership team, and you're the founder and you're the one that's helping doing this, or you've got somebody doing this, it's so important to make sure that, and I was talking about it with a client today, is leadership development. This is not a thing that you're just going to say, all right, Damon, you're a leader and everything's good. Get out there and do her,
Yeah.
The leadership development is such a long-term commitment to people that, just like you said, understanding things like this iceberg of ignorance and understanding the need to, how we as leaders, from that founder, that owner level, or that highest executive level, communicating to those leaders our values. I used to gloss right over that years ago. Okay, what are the values? Well, we're here to do business, right? That's what we're here to do. But
Right.
it's so much deeper than that when we're really trying to build high performing teams. That's why I think the things like you're doing with coaching, or that founder, that owner, that highest level executive, they have a lot of work to do to get themselves up to speed, and then think about the development that needs to go into that team to be successful.
Yeah, you're right. And what you mentioned too is alignment, right? So I think one of the things we did well in the military, and one of the things I brought with me from the military, was that we all knew what the mission was because we took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. So that was the mission. Everybody understood it. And we could every person, I believe, in every service could map what they are doing every day to how it contributes to that mission. So as far as alignment goes, if people understand the mission, they understand the vision, they understand the values, I believe they'll make the right decision every time, right? But they should be able to see whatever it is they're doing at every level and how it contributes to the mission.
Yeah.
And that mission should not be to get you a bigger boat. Because I've seen this, right? You see with some people, I'm sure you've seen it, who are just kind of showy and flashy. They come in, it's like, hey, I got a new boat, I got a new car, I'm going to drive my new Ferrari into work, and I'm going to do these things, right? And I don't know, I personally would not want to work really, really hard so that the owner could buy a new toy. Right. So map it to something that I care about, the mission. What am I doing other than my paycheck? Right. Because we all care about that. But,
Yeah.
that alignment, I believe, is really important.
That is really funny that you said that about someone in a new car, because I remember this was a few years ago now it happened. We were talking with the client about working, and there was a brand new Panamera outside, Porsche Panamera outside the business, and he quick to tell us that that was his brand new Porsche out there. But you go inside and you can tell that the people inside didn't care about that car out there that much, and the business wasn't running them all enough. And
Right.
this is you really got to understand where to invest your time and your effort inside these businesses to build these teams that ultimately will allow you to facilitate an exit or facilitate a nice, long, successful run with your business.
Well, I
So,
think if you have a good team in place and you have good decision making in place, one of the things that we didn't get a chance to talk about, but if you have that all in place and you're as the owner able to leave, go on vacation for a month or longer and have
yeah,
the business run just fine, as I said in the beginning of the program, that really is the best place to be when you're ready for an exit, whenever that's going to be,
yeah,
whether it's 20 years from now or whether it's in 6 months from now. That still is the best place for you to be. So if you
yeah.
prepare your company for an exit, if you have that good team in place, you have people aligned, company's going to run fine and it'll be ready to sell when you're ready.
Yeah. It's a great point. And I just realized that one of our clients, now we've been working with him a while, he just informed the executives last week that, hey, I'm going to leave for 6 weeks. And they're like, okay. And they know, this is not where he's going to the South Pole or something where you don't have phone connection or anything like that. But, a phone call or two during those 6 weeks will be plenty of what he needs. And, when you get those businesses like that, and my point in this is he's not going to exit probably for 2 years at least, because there's more acquisitions to do. There's other things he wants to do to get the value where it needs to be. But these kind of things, the foundational piece of putting this leadership team in place and then continuing to develop those leaders, facilitating that eventual exit is such a key part in the business, because I've seen it on the other end when I'm getting a call when we don't work with somebody early that says, hey, I've got this business and our revenue is what, and it can be big too. I mean, it can be north of tens of millions of dollars in revenue, but I can't get someone to buy the company, or I get such a ridiculously low offer. I can't understand it. I'll stay here for a year or something like that and help them. But nobody wants to pay for that kind of thing because they realize that value is not there in the business anymore when that owner leaves, if they did not build that team. It's so critical.
It is. And I'll give you an example because I was on the other end of it, right? Because I have looked for businesses to buy as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was offered the opportunity to take a look at a business, and it was a trade business. And so after doing some due diligence, owned by a husband and wife team, both of those people were certified in that particular trade, and they paid themselves a very low salary, right? They also were the instructors, right? And they also sold some of the trade equipment. So they had built the business around that, but they owned all the relationships and the sourcing for all of that and everything. It's almost like, you want to buy this business. Okay, let's look at this. I would have to hire someone, right? I would have to hire 2 people to do the instructing.
Yeah.
Right. I had no idea. I've got all these people that have all these relationships as far as, the sourcing, their vendors and all of that stuff. How do you turn that over? That's not easy to turn over. So they're
Mm-hmm.
doing all that too. So that business wasn't ready, right? They obviously didn't have the counsel of exit your way, right? Because that business should have never come up for sale if the person, trying to sell it would have asked, the right questions. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no way I could have bought that business. That business was not ready to sell. And through working with folks like you, if they had come to you, you would have pointed that out in the beginning. It's like, hey, it's going to take you guys a little while to build this to the point where you can exit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that, I mean, because this is where people run into owners run into this challenge. You can run your business successfully for a very long time, make a lot of money, a lot of money, but never be able to sell it.
Right.
And they just don't understand why is it that I can make all kinds of money doing this, but nobody else wants to buy this. And it is because there's too many unknowns between where somebody on the outside is standing and where you've been for 20 years.
Right. So one of the things, again, I'm going to go back to the military. A lot of the things in the military, you're only in a unit for a short period of time, right? So there's a turnover, but you are being trained to replace someone as you are training someone to replace you, right? So you're always training your replacements.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of folks I learned in the real world, right, in corporate America, that don't necessarily want to be replaced. Oh, hey, if I show this person this, then they'll take my job. And I want to do everything I can to be that bottleneck, right? That's not the word that they use, but to sort of be indispensable. Yeah. So some people do that. They set it up so that they have to make all the decisions. And that's not scalable. That's not sellable. That's one of those things that you have to start thinking, who's after me? Who comes next? Right. Mm-hmm. Actually, there's a great book out there by a colleague of mine named Mary Kelly, who has a book called Who Comes Next. Talks about all these things.
Who Comes Next? Mary Kelly. I have to write that down.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Ron, we're up on time here, man, but I really, really enjoyed this conversation today because we got to walk through from the beginning of I'm sitting here today. I know I need to rethink my team. I know I need to build this leadership team out so my business is running better, and it really will facilitate my exit one day, whether that's early or later. But if someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn, here we are. I love LinkedIn, and I do most of my business on LinkedIn. I am easy to find. Ron Higgs. I think I should be the first one you search.
Very good.
And just send me a message, and I'm happy to talk. And one of the things I really like to point out is that, I'm focused on helping people and steering them in the right direction, right? And that doesn't mean necessarily buying my services, right? I'm going to steer you towards whomever I think is in the best position to help you. However, I'll think about this, and this too. An outside perspective can go a long way. Yeah. Right. And so those of us who are consultants who have this view from the outside, I have what's called a dispassionate view of the business, right? I don't know the history. I don't know all the sordid little secrets and everything else. And I'm just focused on the business. The business is my client, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that gives me a dispassionate view of the business. And I think that a lot of folks can use that. So even if you don't want to hire a consultant or somebody else, just have someone from outside the business, take a look and give you an opinion on what they see.
It's a good point. Well, Ron, thanks so much for being here today. I want to thank everyone that was out there listening. If you got in this late, come back in, go back to the beginning, start over, because if you are an owner or know someone, maybe someone in your family needs to do this, or the highest level executive in the business, I think you can learn a lot here, because we were talking about that leadership team building to facilitate your exit. And it's so important as you build a business that's more successful and ready for that eventual exit. Thanks so much for being here. Ron, hang out just for a minute and we will wrap up offline.
Thanks, Damon.